Welcome back to Core Anesthesia. Whether you are a student prepping for tests and boards or a CRNA here to earn CEUs, we are glad you've joined us. For more about us, make sure to check us out on Instagram at Core Anesthesia and online at coreanesthesia.com.
All right, welcome back to Core Anesthesia. I'm Cole here with Tanner, and today we're going to discuss just this idea of when we go through our journey to become CRNAs, there's so much of a competitive edge that has to happen, it has to occur in order to go from phase to phase to phase from your journey of getting through high school all the way to landing your job as a CRNA. And along that journey, I think it's twofold. You have this personality of being competitive to get all the way to the end, but also there is this idea woven into the journey of you have to be better than other people on each phase to make it to the next phase. And as a result, when you get into CRNA school, there's this tug of war and this push and shove that goes on between you and your colleagues, and even when you become a CRNA, between just colleagues within your community of where you work, in terms of trying to level up or one up each other. And we just want to talk through that today and the implications that that could have both on the SRNA journey, but also when you become a CRNA.
I remember this so specifically when I was in school, especially starting out because, you know, you're brand new into clinical, you think you don't know what you don't know, you're trying to figure out if you're doing a good job or not, and then you start having these conversations with other people, and at that point everything is new. Like IV is new. I mean, I know you've done IVs in the past, but an IV in anesthesia, under the drapes or whatever, is new. Intubation's new. Element, every skill is new because you're brand new into clinical. So now all of a sudden you start just comparing numbers and trying to figure out, oh, what's so and so doing? How many have they done? Oh, they did this today. I haven't even intubated a patient yet, and you start playing the comparison game. And we just wanted to talk through really why that's not beneficial for anyone, and why a lot of times we spend so much mental energy in comparison while we're going through school, and really it's the wrong place for your focus. And I think too, it's difficult because it's kind of how you're built getting into CRNA school. Like, it's so competitive getting into CRNA school. It's competitive, as you're going through the ICU training and you're getting into the ICU, and then now you're doing your application. The whole thing is geared to be competitive, and that's not a bad thing, but that's just you're in that frame of mind where you're always competitive, even all the way through the door getting into school. And sometimes that even continues where test scores are used to have placement for clinical sites or different rotations. And so even inside of school there's some competition, but in terms of actual skills and experiences, we're all going to end up to the same spot. But I don't know, I felt that strongly. Is that the same experience you had when, because I mean, we're both competitive, but you're very competitive.
Yes, I'm very competitive, and I had to learn when I entered anesthesia school that it's no longer me trying to one up my classmates to make it to the next phase.
Yeah.
It turns from that type of mindset to let's survive this together. We're going to battle together, and there's a bond that you form with your SRNA colleagues that go through school with you and your classmates that I think just lasts a lifetime. I mean, there are people from our class that we haven't talked to in years, and somebody just texted me the other day, and it's like that instant feeling of you are somebody that I journeyed to and back from anesthesia school with, and we have a bond that'll last forever that you just can't create with somebody else. And I think the idea has to be you switch your mindset from competitiveness to if I'm the top two in my class, I'm going to get my CRNA job that I want to land. And really, the fact of the matter is, it doesn't rely upon that. It just relies upon, did you graduate anesthesia school? Do you understand your content? Are you able to pass your board exam? And then are you a well-versed practitioner from a clinical standpoint that has the skill set and the critical thinking to take care of a patient? It doesn't matter what order you ended up in your anesthesia program. And I think what helped me is, you're right, Tanner, I'm super competitive. Like, that just from being with me over the last few years. And at the same time, though, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I try not to necessarily, like, if I'm gonna be competitive, I joke and tear down in fun, but not in seriousness. Like
Oh,
when it
for
comes to
sure.
getting to anesthesia school, I'm not gonna harm somebody
Yeah.
to one up them. So that wasn't hard for me to like transition out of that.
Right.
But if we're playing like a pickup basketball game, you better believe I'm gonna smack
Oh,
talk
I'm
you
going
and
down. Yeah. I think that's, I because we're all competitive. Like that's the only reason that you could probably be in CRNA school is that you've got that edge and you've got that ability to do what it takes to get to where you're going. But like you said, that and like crossing the line and like harming someone else's path or whatever, like those are two very, very separate things. They should never just being competitive or trying to, work hard to get to where you're going has no space for ever tearing someone else down or impeding their path or gatekeeping or any of the things that would harm someone else. So you're exactly right. Like I think sometimes when what we're talking about today could be that, but it doesn't even have to be that because I think the ultimate point is that you're trying to understand if you're doing a good job or not. Like that you're constantly trying to figure out, am I doing this right? Am I going to be a good anesthesia provider? Am I doing the things I need to be doing? And so the way that I think that naturally the way that you try to figure that out is you look at the people around you and you start saying, okay, well, they're showing up at the same time I'm showing up. I must be, doing a good job there. They're setting up their cases two ahead. Okay, I'll be doing the same thing. And you're just constantly comparing yourself against other people. And this person has this many intubations and I have roughly that same number. So I must be on track. And really, like, we have the numbers that you need to get before you graduate, and everybody's going to get there at some point. Where some people will get there a lot faster and taper off towards the end, and some people have a more steady, incline. But really, I think the barometer needs to be discussing very candidly with your preceptors, with your faculty, and I think you also can have a very small group of people that you can speak very frankly with. And like you and I and two others were that for each other in our school setting where it was like, dude, I don't know if I really messed up on this. This is, I kind of got reprimanded or whatever for this technique, or I wasn't quite good at doing this. Like, what do you guys think? And sometimes you'd be like, yeah, it sounds like you need to brush up on that. It sounds like you like missed a step there. And it was good because I could get frank feedback, or it could be like, no, dude, we're doing the same thing. And that's not comparison. That's like community of being able to understand just experiences in different rooms. But the I think the underlying all of it is, yeah, am I doing a good job? And we oftentimes go to comparing against others and then trying to compete and beat the other people in our class compared to just looking at the standards, looking at the people that are actually in position to give us that feedback.
I think the detriment to doing that and the thing that's missing is your benchmark when you do that is like you said, the other people in your class. But the problem is, how do you know that your class as a whole is at the benchmark that it needs to be? You're just comparing yourself to another subjective standard, not an objective standard. And now that I'm on the flip side of it, and we work at a facility that have different programs that send their SRNAs to our facility, I can see the difference between, oh, well, this program's SRNAs, they're at this point in their journey, and this year's cohort, they're way ahead of where I feel like I was or my cohort was at this time, or compared to the other group of students that I have in the OR, the group of residents that are coming in from this program. And you really look at the cohort as a whole. And when we talk as CRNAs in the break room and trying to see where do we help other people at, we do talk about from an individual standpoint, but by and large, it's a cohort standpoint. And we say, okay, how is this cohort doing? Are they behind on their skill levels at this point in their journey, et cetera? And so, from a perspective of if you're just comparing yourself to other classmates, you're not setting the right benchmark because you need to zoom out and say, okay, how are we as a whole, as a group? Is our group at the right spot that we need to be at, and do we need to work together better to get to that spot rather than competing within your cohort?
You're exactly right about like the benchmark is then moving, and I think also the experiences are moving. So like if you have a classmate who's got 15 intubations and it's week one, and you don't have any intubations, you might be like headhunting for intubations. At the same time, there might be an amazing A line opportunity that was available to you that you weren't going for, because you're just so focused on getting intubations. And so I think, whatever, like the benchmark changes, but then also whatever they're getting more experiences in too, it alters what you're actually looking for, instead of just staying open to the whole gamut of experiences that could be impactful and shape you as you go through your anesthesia training. I remember that specifically with regional, because at the beginning, of course, you just wanted, you like airway, airway, airway. You just want to have like all the intubations and all those things. And I remember I had a chance with spinal, and I was like, it wasn't that I wasn't excited about it, but I was so focused on getting intubations that I was like, oh, we're not going to intubate this patient, and it's a spinal, but I'm not going to get any intubation numbers for this. And in like hindsight, I'm like, man, the spinal experience was so much more formative and needed in my training, especially early on. Like, to get that experience early on in our program was, I think, unusual, and to even have a chance to be involved with that. And so I think that, it can skew what you're actually chasing, and kind of blind you to the opportunities that are right in front of you.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, I was yesterday with a resident in the GI room, and we really hardly ever at our facility have people come into GI with us, because who wants to do GI when you can do the big cranie or the open heart, or I mean the big back case, Whipple. There's so many big cases that are happening in our facility. Why would you pick a day in GI? And this SRNA I thought was beyond where she was at in her clinical journey. And she said, well, I know that there's going to come a day where I'm going to be called upon independently to come into this sick GI room and take care of a lot of these sick inpatients that aren't just, we're not just a facility that does these healthy outpatient GI cases. And she goes, I know that MAC cases are harder than a lot of the general cases. And oftentimes students don't see that. And they want to do just these big intubation cases. But the real test of how successful you're going to be as a CRNA is how you manage an airway when you don't have a secure airway and you're taking care of a sick patient. So I was very impressed with that environment. So to your point, though, let's take a step back and let's just talk about most programs. I feel like start didactically, and they vary of how long you're didactically doing your work before you transition into clinical environment. Some will morph earlier on into doing a couple days a week in the OR. Our program waited halfway through, and then we jumped full scope into clinical. But from a didactic standpoint, this is when you're first getting to know your classmates. You're trying to figure out, okay, who do I get along more with? Who are people that might be a closer knit study group for me? Uh, you're stressed because it's a new environment. It's a new place that you're at. Most people are moving partway across the country. You're just in a completely new place. You're scared, you're nervous, hopefully you're going to be successful at this, and it's hard. And you know it's just going to keep getting harder because everybody in the class above you tells you how miserable their life is, and but it's worth it. You just got to stick through it. And so there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of fear. And so I think the natural tendency is to revert back to I need to have something that makes me feel boosted compared to somebody else. And our natural tendency, because as you said, in order to make it to this point in the journey to become a CRNA, most people are competitive just because of the nature of you have to be competitive to keep making it to the next step. You have to be at least above a certain threshold of each class. And for that being said, you have natural tendency of the people that are in CRNA school to be competitive, and you want to boost yourself because you're nervous, you're anxious about things. And it's easy to compare grades. It's easy to start to form cliques within your group, but I think we need to take a step back and realize, okay, in that moment, these are the moments where the schools that do a lot of team building exercises, a lot of you're in this together as a cohort and not individuals, I think thrive a lot more from this specific standpoint of weeding each other out or tearing each other down, because you start to form this mindset of we are a group and our goal is to make it across the finish line as a group, no man left behind. But unfortunately, I don't feel like that always is the case. We tend to view it all as individuals.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the sad part of that is, if we don't have each other's backs going through school, who else has got you? Because you're in a new room. You don't know those circulators. They might be great people. It might be super nice. They have no connection to you. The CRNAs, you might be there for a month and you move on to the next place. Again, might be great people. They don't have any connection to you. If you don't have if you're not the ones that are coming together and have each other's backs and working through this together as a cohort, like there's nobody else. There's no other floor that's going to be available for you to text after a tough case or to reach out to. There's hopefully your school staff or people that are in and around the program. But if we can't carry each other through this, there's nobody else. And I think that's a huge risk if we are in this super competitive me versus you mode, is that then we just remove the safety net of being able to care for each other. And we have to understand that that's one of our roles. And we get so self-centered too, because school is so hard and we think about our experience only. And meanwhile, you've got other people going through the exact same thing, and you can understand it like nobody else can understand it. And so you have to be there for each other. And I was on the receiving end of that going through school. I remember people reaching out when I had some tough things going on, and that was incredibly impactful and honestly probably kept me in school. There were times I literally wrote out the email to get out of school, and I was like ready to send it. And I remember people reaching out and just being um, you know really helpful for me to understand, like, this is temporary. This is, I'm not in this alone. We get it. We have the same shared experiences. And so yeah, you just have to be there for each other. There's no other option.
Yeah, personally, I remember this was probably 6 months into our program. One of the best days that happened to me in the program, but also started as one of the most upsetting moments. We were in our physics class that we had to take the first summer of school, and it was like a chemistry physics. I can't remember what it was
Yeah, it
called
was like a
exactly, but
combined.
yeah, and so I was a chem minor for undergrad, and so to be honest, a lot of this part of class was pretty easy for me, but not so much for the other people in our class. And I remember after we finished one of the tests, a couple of the people in our class were very upset, and they were very verbally outspoken, saying how they thought the test was a lot harder this year because the professor knew that Cole was a had a chem minor and that he was just doing well in the exams. And so because of me, I made the test super hard this year, and a lot of people didn't do as well. And that made me upset at first because I mean, I wasn't trying to make anything like that happen, even if it was true. But again, it was this competitive thing that came out. People were upset about it, and I remember you and two other people that day after class were like, you know what, like you don't need to be around the people that are saying that. Just how about you come study with us? We would love to benefit off of what you know from chemistry stuff that you can help us through this. And it was your kindness towards that and your approach of we're all in this together, rather than make Cole feel bad because he did well on an exam better than us. Let's bring him in and have him as a resource to help us. And that was the day that Cole and Tanner started studying together, which ultimately led into core anesthesia. We never would have had this if it wasn't for that day. But it was literally, I remember, like this avenue of two choices. I could continue going with this group that was honestly tearing me down and making me feel bad because they were so competitive about how we all did on our exam scores versus you and the other two people that were very much like we're all in this together. Let's all benefit. We know we're not on the same playing field right now, but let's use each other's strengths. Like Cole, you're better at this specific class, but there's another class that we're better at that we can help you with. And that was a different trajectory in the scope of my ultimate anesthesia training that forever, I think, changed how I progressed through the program. I don't know if I would have been successful. I don't know if I would have gotten through if it wasn't for you guys.
Oh, that's really cool for you to share, because that's, I remember that day and I didn't quite understand like the whole backstory of that. So that's yeah, that's pretty cool. We were just trying to poach the best person to help with our studying. We needed help.
I'm not gonna lie, I remember coming in there and like, oh yeah, these guys need some
We
help.
need some help.
They,
For sure. It was a desperation move. That's
but
awesome.
we did it. We got through together,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So yeah, I think for the first phase of school, the first phase of going through your CRNA training, that is the scope of what needs to happen is you need to find the realization of, okay, you're all going to be better at certain things versus others. So we need to utilize each other's strengths as a group to all get through and not tear each other down as individuals, not compete with each other because like we said, this is where the identity changes from that of individuals trying to make the next level to a group trying to survive and get through. Honestly, CRNA school is just different than just another phase of learning. Like I literally think it I relate it to you're in a military group and you're going to war with honestly yourself because it's such a mental battle, but you need each other to get through that. And then you want to come out successful on the other side. You don't want to leave somebody behind. And they're just different than undergrad. It's different than your ICU journey. It's just different as a whole. And the first few months, my recommendation would be to find that with your cohort. Do things with your cohort to become a family, to become a team, so that as it gets harder and harder and harder through school, you're already set up with the right foundation as a group to be successful and to bring everybody across the finish line. Because there's going to be times where each and every one of you is lagging or lacking in a certain area, and you need the group to drag you along to help you. You're all going to have mental weeks, days, even months where you're like, I can't do this anymore. Like where Tanner wanted to quit. And if we would have let him, he wouldn't be sitting here today. There were times where I definitely was going to quit, and Tanner was able to push me through my darkest hours. So yeah, I think it's very important in the first phase of your SRNA journey to get in the right mindset. You're not an individual anymore. You're a team that's going to get across the finish line. And then we can move in now to like we've already talked on this a little bit, but the clinical side, you start to become individualized because you're not in a classroom together anymore. You're all spaced out in your own operating rooms, and it becomes very lonely. Sometimes you're the only student at your facility. Like the people in your class, they're spaced out around the country, and you're the only one at this hospital, and it becomes very isolating and very lonely. So do you want to speak on that and how when you come back and talk with your classmates, how the tendency again is just to one up each other?
Yeah, we talk about this all the time that the clinical portion is so isolating because there's nobody else in the room with you. So you, if you have a great day, you have a great day by yourself. If you have a bad day, then there's nobody to come alongside you and say, "Yeah, I made that same mistake yesterday," or "I totally understood why you made that decision." There's nobody. So it's just you and your own world, and you can either spiral or even on your celebration or on your wins, you want to tell somebody, and there's not somebody there. So inevitably, you find your group that you want to go talk to and kind of debrief and talk about those things. And I think that's where it has to be a safe space because, again, we're always trying to think about, making ourselves, you know, we want to share our wins, which if you're not with a safe group, that's what they're going to share with you when you come and you say, "Oh, I made this, you know, error or lapse in judgment, or I didn't pay attention to this." They're not going to come to you with the exact same story. They're going to come to you with, "Oh, that's tough." Meanwhile, today while I was fiber optically awake, awake fiber optic intubating this patient, and while they were in the ER, on the floor, and I saved the day, you're like, okay, like there's no way that happened. But that's the story that you're getting. And so I think that spiral that we have that can be isolating can get worse if you're with people that are still staying competitive even when you're trying to debrief and share those things. And if you can find the right people like we did that can hear the things that you're talking about and they're able to sympathize with that, then I think that's where it's really helpful.
Yeah, I want to speak to both sides of this. I want to speak first to the person that is trying to one up somebody else in their class because I get you. I have the same exact tendencies. When, because you alone know the mistakes you make, and I was the type of person where if I missed an intubation to start the day, it affected negatively the rest of my day. And I inevitably made more mistakes that I probably would not have made because I was already in my head. I was already fighting negative thoughts. I was just in a downward spiral throughout that clinical day. And at the end of that day, then I'm like, man, I need a feel good moment. And the natural desire from myself and my flesh is to, okay, if I have a chance to talk to a classmate, I'm gonna find the one or two things I did well during the day, and I'm going to really emphasize those things. And I'm going to share those things to my colleague to make me feel better. But I'm not even thinking about the fact of how that's going to affect my classmate, how that's going to affect them when on their standpoint, they're viewing my conversation with them and I'm just telling them all these amazing things that I did, but I'm purposely leaving out the 5 bad things that I did. And so they're now on the receiving end saying, "Oh, well, man, look at Cole. Like he's doing all these awesome things. I made these mistakes today. Why am I making mistakes?" And then I'm creating more doubt and more fear in my classmate of, well, am I not doing a good enough job? Am I not staying up with where I'm supposed to be in this cohort? And what was the purpose of that? It all was rooted in the fact that I wanted a little bit of self pep in my step moving forward from the clinical site that day of I have a little bit of something to hold my head high with, even though deep down I know that I messed up several times and I'm going to go home upset internally. But now I just duplicated that because I'm going to make my classmate go home feeling that way. And so that was the wonderful thing about us is we share, at least I felt like we were very open. We shared the mistakes that we made with each other because I actually felt better when I got those mistakes out of my chest or off my chest and it wasn't a I'm gonna shove those into the closet and just bury those things. I got it out in the open, and you helped me feel better about myself because of it. So then we both felt better going home rather than one of us feeling better going home.
Yeah, and I think that helps you on several different levels because you not only are able then to like look at the issue and address it as an issue instead of just like you said sweeping it under the rug and trying to just focus on the good things because that'll help you actually continue to grow and improve as a provider when you're addressing the problems because I might come to you and say, yeah, like this happened. And you're like, yeah, man, that's, you got to think about this, this, and this. And then that helps me actually be better instead of just this artificial, no, everything's fine. And meanwhile, there's no substance underneath that persona that, you're a really great provider. Meanwhile, you don't have the actual skills or things to back it up. You've just like been giving that impression to everybody. And I get it because when we're with new preceptors, like that's what we're trying to put forward, that we're competent, that we know what we're doing. Like you're in this performative mode anyways, and so it makes sense that that translates into speaking with the people around you. But like you said, it just gives this false front. It's like the Instagram version of your clinical experience, and you're just seeing the highlights, and you're not seeing, anything behind the scenes.
And do you think that I mean, I was trying to address this issue where do you honestly think it's going to help you feel better? Like, because whenever I would do something like that, I'd go home and I'd still feel bad about
Yeah,
myself. And I'd feel bad because now I falsely presented myself to my classmate and they're probably feeling bad about
yeah.
themselves.
I think that's the thing where it's like it's just inauthentic and you're never going to feel good when you're inauthentic and you think in that moment you maybe feel good because somebody thinks that you're great but they're thinking of you as being great is inauthentic. They have the wrong information. You're discussing that with them of you being great is inauthentic. You're not giving them all the information. Your path forward is not really accurate based on what you said because it's inauthentic. So I think the whole thing, like you might get a whiff, like a whisper of feeling great in that moment, but ultimately, like we know this just as human beings, like it's not something that is going to, fill your cup as you move forward. It's just a temporary fix. And so I think that's where the cycle actually gets worse and then you spend more time trying to white knuckle maintain that reputation that if you ever would make a mistake, which you already have a million times, but you never told anybody, that would crumble the glass house that you've created. And so I think it's just there's so many things there that add additional pressure to an already difficult journey of going through CRNA school.
Yeah, and I think the recommendation from this is if you're fearful to tell a classmate about a mistake you've made, my recommendation would be to do it because I think you're gonna find, actually I know you're gonna find that they're going to become more open then to reciprocate that and they're going to respond and say, "Oh, I'm so glad to hear that you said you did that because I did this the other day and then I did this the other day." And before you know it, you're going to talk about things over the past month that upset you, that things you did wrong, that then beat you up the rest of the day, and you're going to leave that conversation feeling more empowered because what's going to happen is you're going to realize, okay, I'm on this journey to become a CRNA, and this is a natural part of that journey. This is a natural part of growing to become there. Because the tendency then, if you don't share your weaknesses with each other and where you're struggling, the tendency is you're gonna think that you're a failure, you're not cut out to become a CRNA, that you're not progressing as you're supposed to be, and self-doubt is going to continue to trickle into an already built program where the mental battle is real. And if you can avoid the extra layers that you would put on yourself, it would help you just astronomically and immensely because now you're empowering yourself to realize, okay, this is natural. This is what is supposed to happen. I'm supposed to be broken down so I can build myself back up into a well-equipped CRNA and healthcare provider that is going to be successful. But you don't transition from ICU nurse to successful CRNA by just this straight linear uphill path. You get broken down first and then you build yourself back up. And in expressing where your struggles are with your classmates, you're going to find that it's natural where you're at. You're doing something right and you're growing because of it. Um, so that part is more what I think of the second phase of competitiveness of school. And then as we get to the end, it becomes board prep and how much you remember, how's people doing on the C exam. And that just becomes something where, I mean, Tanner, you and I have openly discussed this a lot on our podcast. Just the idea of how test taking was something that wasn't your greatest strength. It was
Yeah.
something that you struggled with, but that didn't mean you were not cut out to be a CRNA. I mean, everybody that you work with every facility you've been at requests you for almost every case. Like you're one of the best CRNA providers. Just because you're not a great test taker doesn't mean that, that you're not going to be successful.
Yeah.
So what would your suggestion be for this final phase of the tendency to become competitive with each other?
Think and I think this starts as well back in didactic because you'll have people say, night before a test, I was up till 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning studying, woke back up at 5, went back through all the outlines, PowerPoints, and you're thinking, well, I went to bed at 8:30 and I got up at 7:30, and I show up for this test and you're automatically thinking like, am I doing this right?
All right, hold on. I'm calling bull on that. Who in anesthesia school gets 11 hours of sleep at one
This
time?
is meant for effect, okay? This is but the I think that's like it starts all the way back there where you think, yeah, like am I doing this right? And then it gets to, you know, study habits and how much you're studying or if you take an evening off or like you take a Saturday off, that'll really start ruffling some feathers if you're like, "Oh man, I'm going to take a Saturday." And people are like, "Oh man, I was studying the whole weekend," or I never did that when I was in school or whatever the comments are going to be. And then it gets really bad during board prep because this is it, like this is you have to have this. And so then you start looking at other people's study habits. What are you doing? How often are you studying? You're waking up at 5 o'clock and you're studying till 10 p.m. and then you're drinking a coffee and studying all like people's study habits can be insane. And that's where you have to have really great self-awareness of like what is my journey in terms of studying, what works for me, what does my time away from studying look like that I need, what kind of rest or going for a walk or just doing something else. Those are very personal things and it's not a one size fits all thing. So when you find something that works for you, you and I talked a lot about this in school. Like we would work really hard to take evenings off at a certain point, like whether that's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, whatever. We try to just shut school off and have time to be with family, to be at home, to not think about school. Same for weekends. We try to take one day to just get out of the school's mentality. And so I think that's you look at other people that are not doing that and then you automatically there's a competition level there where you think, oh no, I'm behind. And really that's not it. Like you need to find what works for you and you need to focus on what works for you. And just being aware of what other people are doing does nothing but add additional pressure where you don't have that. And like you said, like I'm not a good test taker. So there'd be things that would really, really frustrate me about test taking. Like I thought I knew topics better than some other people and they were testing better than I was and getting better scores. And if I let that be like I was still doing fine on my tests to continue progressing through school, but if I let that, kind of burn up in my mind of like, oh, I got to keep beating these people. Like that just wasn't where I was gifted, and that's okay. And I can just move past that and focus on, I'm still being successful there, enough to keep moving forward, and I can have strengths in other ways and be open with that. And I don't have to fake like, oh yeah, I actually got a 98 on that while I got an 87 or 81 or whatever it was. And so just being authentic with people, I think makes it so you're open when they need help from you as well. They know they can go there and it's a safe place.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I totally agree with all of that. And this ultimately builds, I think, if you set yourself up with this type of team-minded approach to anesthesia school, when you graduate and land your first job, you want to enter into a group of colleagues that have that same approach. And I think we all know, we've all seen different units and how they operate, different clinical sites that may not have this, where it's a very dog eat dog world. The break room is always talking behind somebody's back from a CRNA to CRNA standpoint, and it's just not a good culture. And no one wants to work in that environment. I haven't found a single person that truly thrives in that type of environment. It's all this fake make myself feel better compared to this other person mindset, but no one's truly happy. No one wants to work there, and often these places are the ones that you'll find have huge sign-on bonuses because they're just trying to get people to come there. And so the part I want to end with is this is not just about going through anesthesia school. This translates to where you want to work. How do you want to fit in with a certain type of culture where your job is actually at? And for the people I've talked to that have gone places that have that dog eat dog world mindset, they hate it. They end up leaving and I'm probably just throwing a number out here, but my estimate from who I've talked to is almost 50% of these people, they stop that contract early. They pay back that sign-on bonus because it's just miserable. You don't want to be in that type of environment. And if the lesson can be learned from that is start that mindset while you're in school. But if you're listening, you've already graduated, find a job that has CRNAs that supports one another, doesn't tear each other down. And if you are already in a job where you're not searching right now, what can you do to make your facility, make your culture more positive so that it's shaped in that direction? To be honest, mine was kind of in a rough spot about 3 years ago, the place that I'm working at, and we have really made a big shift in culture. And the morale of our facility has improved so much in the last 3 years because frankly, there's more of a team aspect to it and not a bunch of individuals that are just trying to go about their career. So, my point being, this is not just a talk about competitiveness in anesthesia school. This becomes a talk on your career path as a whole, the anesthesia profession as a whole, and the aspect of why I love CRNAs, why I love nurse anesthesia as a profession is because the more that I've interacted and networked with people in this community makes me realize how much of a team-minded aspect this really is, and how anesthesia, the world's not huge. It's a smaller profession if you think of it from a large standpoint compared to other professions. It's a pretty small world. You don't want to be burning bridges of people, backstabbing people, but when you work together, you can accomplish a lot. I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add to that before we wrap up.
My only thought was this is kind of goes back to like the clinical setting, but when you're with preceptors, like there's never a space where it is okay to talk poorly about one of your classmates to preceptors. Like that might be an easy thing to do to make yourself like you can say something in the clinical setting that's going to kind of make you buddy buddy with your preceptor because they might be talking about somebody or experience they had last week, and it's an easy way for you to just get a leg up to be in on the joke or just kind of use them to elevate your position just in a clinical day, which is what we all want. We want that day to go smoothly. So that's an easy way for you to just use somebody else to get to where you're going. And it's never just make a commitment. It's never appropriate and never something that you should be doing. Again, if we don't have each other's backs while we're going through school, then like nobody's got you. There's no safety net there. So that was just something that as you were bringing that up, talking about culture of work, like that's for sure something that make that commitment while you're in as a work too, about discussing your colleagues and those types of things. But there's just this that's an easy thing to do, unfortunately, to just kind of move yourself ahead and just make a commitment that you'll act with integrity and not do that.
Yeah, so to wrap up as a whole, in summary, there's really two different sides that we wanted to address, and it's the first of if you're somebody that's overly competitive, somebody like myself, you really have to make the conscious effort and decision as you transition into the anesthesia space of, okay, this is not me trying to make it to the next level. This is now I'm a part of a team. I'm not trying to one up somebody else. I'm trying to bring people along with me to the end, to the finish line. And be careful, be hesitant in how you interact with either your classmates or then when you graduate your colleagues in terms of trying to make yourself feel better at the expense of somebody else. It's a very, very dangerous area to be walking on, and it's not helpful for anybody. But on the other side of things, if you're somebody that's on the recipient end of somebody trying to one up you, just know odds are they're not being entirely truthful. There are things that put them in the same exact boat that you are, especially if you're a resident going through your clinical rotations right now. You're in this together. They're making mistakes just like you are. They're growing just like you are. And don't let that false facade make you feel worse about yourself, but find somebody or at least a group of people where you can truly be open with them, where they're going to share their struggles just like you're going to share your struggles. And you'll find as a whole, just like Tanner and I did, that that ultimately was a major component of our success going through anesthesia school was the ability to let out the struggles that we were having so that we can in turn boost each other up and encourage each other and get us both across the finish line.